Often I have felt that I must praise my world for what my eyes and ears have seen these many years, and what my heart has loved. And often I have tried to start my lines, "Dear Earth," I say, and then I pause to look once more. Soon I am bemused and far away in wonder, so I never get beyond "Dear Earth." Thanksgiving is a complicated holiday with a complex history, but aren't we all like that? We offer up for the possibility of worship our gratitude for the whole story of Thanksgiving, of ourselves, of our feasts and our famines. We lift up in prayerful thanksgiving those places in our lives that feel abundant. We lift up in prayer for healing those places in our lives that feel thin and stretched and inadequate. We lift up our regret and sorrow for injustices done in our name or by us, all those histories of hurts that have been rewritten to make us feel better. And we lift up in hope the thought of a table where all are welcome, where we break bread across differences and celebrate a harvest of justice and friendship, of compassion and plenty. Spirit of life, we offer you our complicated holiday tables and complex personal histories. Here we are, our very lives, our own offering in this time of Thanksgiving. Amen. Our reading this morning is called Garden Meditation by Reverend Max Coots. Let us give thanks for a bounty of people, for children who are our second planting, and though they grow like weeds and the wind too soon blows them away, may they forgive us our cultivation and fondly remember where their roots are. Let us give thanks for generous friends with hearts and smiles as bright as their blossoms, for feisty friends as tart as apples, for continuous friends who, like scallions and cucumbers, keep reminding us that we've had them, for crotchety friends, sour as rhubarb and as indestructible, for handsome friends who are as gorgeous as eggplants and as elegant as a row of corn, and the others as plain as potatoes, and so good for you. For funny friends who are as silly as Brussels sprouts and as amusing as Jerusalem artichokes, and serious friends as unpretentious as cabbages, as subtle as summer squash, as persistent as parsley, as delightful as dill, as endless as zucchini, and who, like parsnips, can be counted on to see you through the winter. For old friends nodding like sunflowers in the evening time, and young friends coming on as fast as radishes. For loving friends who wind around us like tendrils and hold us despite our blights, wilts, and witherings. And finally, for those friends now gone, like gardens past that have been harvested, but who fed us in their times, that we might have life thereafter. For all of these, we give thanks. This year, Lisa and I are hosting Thanksgiving at our house. We have a lot of lists going, grocery lists and prep lists, lists of items other people are bringing, Post-it notes of things not to forget. Every year when I boil onions for the baked pearl onions, I remind myself to save the onion water for the gravy. Every year I forget. There's always next year. That is what I love so much about Thanksgiving, the comfort of having the same food cooked in exactly the same way year after year. And of course we will be cooking the food the right way, that is to say, my way, the way that my mother and aunt and cousin and sister and grandmother would cook it. When I was 12, my parents divorced, and for the first time ever, I spent Thanksgiving away from my mother and her extended family. My sister and I went with my dad to his best friend's house in Western Mass. Fortunately, I was best friends with my dad's best friend's daughter, so that helped some. But I was still terribly homesick. And the food was not cooked in the old familiar way. Everything was different there. It took some getting used to. Over the years, the trek out to Western Mass has become the new treasured tradition, and I came to love being with my dad and my best friend's family on that special day. But what helped was that every year when we came home, we would prepare a second Thanksgiving with my mother. And so we still got to be together for the holiday, and we still got to have the food our way, after all. Lisa teases me about my need to have everything the same on Thanksgiving. She doesn't understand why we would need 2 kinds of potatoes and turnips and squash, or why with everything else on the table there also needs to be a small dish of black olives, or why, if we spent so much time making fresh cranberry sauce, would we need to have the canned stuff as well. That's right. But you know what? In the face of so many unknowns in life, with so much wrong in the world, I like knowing that the food on our Thanksgiving table will be the same as it has been for generations in my family. I find it to be a great comfort. This year, my best friend's family will have a difficult Thanksgiving. There will be an empty seat at their table where her stepson should have been. I'm not able to be there with her as she and her family deal with this agonizing loss. But I hope that having familiar faces and food at her table will also bring her some small comfort. And I wish all of you small comforts in the face of losses that you have endured this year. I am so poignantly grateful for the family that I will welcome to my Thanksgiving table. Being together is the greatest blessing I can ask for. And I'm determined to be grateful for the food on my Thanksgiving table in a deeper way, too. Not grateful simply because the food is cooked the way I like it, but grateful for each and every dish of food, for the ingredients, for the cooks, for the incredible magic that is each vegetable, for the laborers who planted and harvested them, for the drivers who delivered them, and the grocery store clerks and farm stand workers who put them in my bags to bring home. On my quest for deeper engagement and gratitude for my Thanksgiving table, I have begun to investigate just where my food will be coming from. Other than Mother Earth, dear Earth, who do I send all of this gratitude to exactly? I'll start with an easy one. I am grateful for our sexton, Stephen Cove, who each year makes a date with me to go cranberry picking and shows me where the best spots to pick are. These cranberries are the start of a cranberry quince sauce that Lisa is cooking up for us this week. This is the best way to enjoy food, of course, to grow or pick it yourself. We will also be having oysters on Thanksgiving, straight from my dad's oyster flat in Plymouth. I've put a bit of my own back-breaking labor into the farm this year, so our oyster stew will, I'm sure, be particularly delicious. And what about the star of the show, the turkey? I've been investigating. Compared with other meats, turkey is fairly easy on the planet. Producing and delivering a pound of beef to your home emits 2.5 times as much greenhouse gas as bringing a turkey to the table. Poultry in general requires far less feed per pound of meat produced than beef does. Also, a bird emits significantly smaller amounts of the greenhouse gas, nitrous oxide, in its waste than a cow does. The vegetarians in the room can get a little smug here. Go ahead. A 1-cup serving of broccoli is responsible for only 0.4 pounds of carbon dioxide equivalents. I learned by reading my nephew's Dynamath Scholastic magazine this month that more than 200 million turkeys are raised in the U.S. each year, and that the highest turkey-producing states are Minnesota, North Carolina, Arkansas, Missouri, and Virginia. That section of the magazine had an activity where he had to practice reading graphs. My turkey for Thursday happens to come from Pennsylvania. I could have paid a little more for a turkey from Vermont, but I didn't. But you know, before this week, I probably wouldn't have even thought to check where my turkey was coming from. My butternut squash is from my sister's garden. More accurately, her compost pile. Squash is not picky. It will grow anywhere. Seeds from last year's squash will take root and grow into this year's crop. It reminds me of that Marge Piercy poem about squash, The Attack of the Squash People. It's about zucchini, but I have to share it with you. And thus the people every year in the valley of humid July did sacrifice themselves to the long green phallic god and eat and eat and eat. They're coming, they're on us, the long striped gourds, the silky babies, the hairy adolescents, the lumpy vast adults, like the trunks of green elephants. Recite 50 zucchini recipes. Zucchini tempura, cream soup, sauté with olive oil and cumin, tomatoes, onion, frittata, casserole of lamb, baked top with cheese, marinated, stuffed, stewed, driven through the heart like a steak. Get rid of old friends. They too have gardens and full trunks. Look for newcomers. Befriend them in the post office. Unload on them and run. Stop tourists in the street. Take truckloads to Boston. Give to your Red Cross. Beg on the highway, please take my zucchini. I have a crippled mother at home with heartburn. Sneak out before dawn to drop them in other people's gardens. In baby buggies at church doors. Shot smuggling zucchini into mailboxes. A federal offense. With a suave reptilian glitter, you bask among your raspy fronds, sudden and huge as alligators. You give and give too much, like summer days limp with heat, thunderstorms bursting their bags on our heads as we salt and freeze and pickle for the too little to come. I love that poem. I love so many poems by Marge Piercy, and I see her sometimes in Wellfleet. Not all of us can be farmers or even gardeners, of course. My own gardening, for example, is limited to the large ceramic pots on my front and back steps. I have to be content with basil, mint, and some scraggly cherry tomato plants. Next best is supporting local farms. But in today's day and age, most of our food comes from farther afield. It's estimated that the average American meal travels about 1,500 miles to get from farm to plate. And today, the typical American meal contains ingredients from at least 5 countries outside of the U.S. Why is this cause for concern? It's concerning because the long-distance, large-scale transportation of food consumes a lot of fossil fuels. Transporting foods over long distances also generates a lot of carbon dioxide emissions. Also concerning, in order to transport food long distances, much of it is picked while still unripe and then gassed to ripen it after transport. Food is highly processed in factories using preservatives, irradiation, and other means to keep it stable for transport and sale. Scientists are even experimenting with genetic modification to produce longer-lasting, less perishable produce. It's scary stuff. When you become more conscious about food, there is a lot to worry about. There are the sanitation and morals of big meat companies and the ethics and growing practices of big factory farms. There are the increasing number of seed varieties being corrupted by Monsanto. There are poor countries caught up in a trap of exporting all of their food. There are all those unpronounceable ingredients in processed foods. An average trip to the grocery store shows without a doubt that our food is overly packaged and that we bring home a completely excessive amount of plastic every time we go shopping. And what of the human element? Virtually every vegetable or piece of fruit that we purchase was hand harvested by a farm laborer. While the produce we buy may have been mechanically sorted and packed, supercooled, chemically treated, waxed, and shipped across the nation, often the last hand to touch the produce we buy was that of a migrant farm worker. Simply by purchasing the tomatoes, pumpkins, peppers, squash, and apples found on our tables on Thanksgiving, we are connected with a hidden world of laborers, a weave of interconnected lives. The roughly 1.8 million people who spend their days harvesting the crops and raising the livestock that wind up on American plates rarely get thanked, even on Thanksgiving. They work long hours in harsh conditions, often without steady salaries, paid vacation, or sick leave. The median pay for farm workers in 2010 was $18,970, according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics. I've actually seen other statistics that place it much lower than that, especially for migrant workers. I'm going to be really honest with you right now. When Unitarian Universalist delegates chose ethical eating as the topic of our statement of conscience at General Assembly in 2011, I thought, oh no. Just the words ethical eating made me feel guilty. I pictured smug vegans holding forth at worship services about how terrible it is to eat meat. I worried that our denominational website would feature pictures of chickens stacked in small cages and that tomatoes would be banned from potluck suppers. I worried about this particularly because I am someone who consistently forgets her reusable grocery bags in the car. Even after preparing for this sermon and learning about food miles, I bought a bag of baby Brussels sprouts grown in the Netherlands because they were cute. I tried to shop at farmers markets, but last week all they seemed to have was radish greens, and I don't know what to do with those. Maybe you are like me and don't want to feel bad about food. After all, we can't all grow our own. We can't all afford to buy only organic vegetables. We can't get everything from our local farmers. But you know what? I don't think ethical eating means that we have to feel guilty about all of our food choices. I, for one, still plan to enjoy my Thanksgiving meal, even those Brussels sprouts. Here's what I think. We can all afford to do a little better with our food practices. We don't have to do so from a place of shame and guilt. We can do so from a place of curiosity about where our food comes from and gratitude for what ends up on our table. On a labor movement website, Daniel Rothenberg writes, "It's clear that farm workers, like all Americans, deserve to earn enough to provide for themselves and their families. Nevertheless, on Thanksgiving, let us not think of our nation's farm workers simply as a social problem requiring a focused political response, but rather as people whose lives are connected to our own. The tragedy of our nation's farm workers lies not in their difference from other Americans," he writes, "but rather in their great and overwhelming similarity. On our nation's harvest holiday, we should honor the harvesters and recognize their presence at our tables." So for today, for this week, let that be our goal, to do a little bit better, to make one small change out of a place of thankfulness. And maybe that change begins with making present in some small way at our table all those who made it possible for the food to be there, to give thanks in a deeper way for our harvest. Let me tell you one more tradition we had when I was little. This one came from the UU church that I was part of in Plymouth. Every year around the holidays, we had a little box like this one on our table. It's a Unitarian Universalist Service Committee initiative called Guest at Your Table. It's a way during the holidays and times of bounty and harvest and gift giving to invite to your table those who may not be experiencing such abundance. The UUSC is dedicated to healing people affected by disasters, to promoting workers' rights and a living wage, to advancing civil liberties and the democratic process, and to rebuilding communities with sustainable access to water, food, and livelihood. I think maybe next year we should order some of these boxes so that when we sit down to a table full of food at Thanksgiving or experience other moments of gratitude around having enough, being enough, receiving enough, we can give back through the simple gesture of adding some money to the box, a token of our gratitude, a small step in giving back to a world that has been giving so much to us, a small contribution to justice building. Oh, and next year I'm going to get a turkey from Vermont. Let that be our goal, to do a little bit better, to make one small change, to invite gratitude and justice to be a guest at our table. May it be so. Amen, and blessed be.